Welcome back to Buckeye Bigfoot. Hey there, everyone. Well, tonight I not only have a trilogy of encounters from the same person, but from different points in their life, but I have a guest narrator who will be narrating one of those encounters. Now, he's got a new channel here on YouTube that he's working on growing, and I think you'll like him. His name is Matt, and his channel is Stories by Matt. I'll put a link to his channel in the description below, and I'll put a link up in the right corner while he's narrating. And I'll put a video link to his channel at the end of this video. Now, normally, I don't do Ohio encounters on Tuesdays, but I really wanted to get this segment with Matt up, and I really thought that Jim, the man who had these encounters, well, I think he had some really interesting moments that you would find interesting too. All right, Matt's going to kick off this trilogy tonight, and then I'm going to slide in the side door and pick up from right there. So grab those extra special snacks, the kind you only put out on the plate when company's coming over. Because guess what? We have a guest in the house tonight, folks. Let's get this started. Take it away, Matt.
My encounter happened when I was 14, maybe 15. I'm not sure. I did not have my driver's license at the time. I grew up in a little town north of Youngstown, Ohio, called Vienna. Now, we're going back a few years because I'm 63 now, but in my mind's eye, it's crystal clear. A friend of mine, we'll call him PL, and myself were squirrel hunting. We had gone to an area we had visited many times. It wasn't the best location, but we could relax in the area and smoke our cigarettes. On this day, while we were chilling and smoking, there was a huge, loud noise. It sounded as if a tree had been snapped in two. PL and I looked at each other and both said, "What the heck was that?" I know my face showed as much concern and fear as PL's. Shortly after the noise, we decided it was time to head home. I'm telling you, there was an overwhelming feeling of being watched, and we were both feeling very uneasy. Needless to say, we started home. In the path to the house, about 75 yards from where we heard the noise, there was a very large beech tree down, and it completely blocked the path. The tree had been down for a few years, so whenever we would cross it, I would give PL my gun. I would crawl over it, then PL would give me both guns as he would crawl over. On this day, as we approached the beech tree, I handed PL my gun and began to crawl over. But before I was over, PL jumped over the tree with a gun in each hand. I looked at PL and he was very unnerved. PL said, "Did you see it?" I said, "See what?" as I reached for my gun. PL had a grip on my gun and would not let it go. Again, he said, "Did you see it?" I said, "See what?" Again, tugging on my gun. PL finally released my gun and said again, "Did you see it?" I asked again, "See what?" That's when PL regained his composure and said there was a big monkey about 7 foot tall that looked like a man. It stepped out of the woods right by PL and proceeded to step over a 4-foot property fence that separated the woods. As he or it did so, it looked directly at PL. He made several references to it being a monkey man. I had a single-shot 12-gauge shotgun, so as quickly as possible, I emptied my 6-shot squirrel shell from my gun and put in a pumpkin ball. PL followed the same, dumping out his .22 shorts onto the ground and reloading his rifle with .22 LR. At 14, we were heading up for war. We headed back to my house. Both of us were moving in circles as we would go, in an effort to keep our backs covered. We made it back to the house, both of us scared silly. We were able to regroup and tell my dad of this sighting. My dad said it sounded like Bigfoot, but was not concerned. We both wanted to call in an airstrike, but concluded that that was our 14-year-old brains thinking. Now, the strange part of this is some years later. I had a son who was about 13 or 14, and I told him this story, and he laughed, saying I was crazy. But about 6 months after my son diagnosed me as crazy, I was able to contact PL. We had dropped out of touch our senior year, as so many do. PL and I had made arrangements to meet after many years of separation. Our meeting went great. We were able to catch up on old times and tell of our lives as adults. During the first night of visiting, I asked PL if he remembered hearing the noise. Without saying another word, PL began telling my son the same story almost word for word. Now, this happened when I was about 31 years old, and I had not prompted PL on what to say. But for two people to remember the same thing so many years later has to hold some truth. Well, that's my story. I know that PL still remembers it, and I remember the look on his face still.
Okay, here is an extension of a story. I am 63 now, and this happened to myself and my friend PL. We were hunting in Ohio north of Youngstown. We were 14 or 15 years old. I had an encounter earlier in the day and decided we would hunt in a different section of the woods, some 3 miles from our first incident. As PL and I walked into a field just east of an old set of railroad tracks, we both saw a large black mass in the field. The mass looked like a cow was spread out on the ground, trying to hide, but with little to no cover. Now, being at the age when we know everything, we decided to shoot it. Knowing now that distance and gravity play a big role in bullet travel, I would say we were well out of range for our .22 long rifle and 12 gauge with non-rifled slugs. But we let loose a barrage of gunfire that would make any Hollywood movie envious. I don't think we hit anything, but PL used, I'm sure, a box of 50 bullets, as I shot every slug and buckshot I had. To our surprise at the end of our shooting, this thing rose up to all fours and did a crab crawl to the east, then sprawled out again in what looked like an effort to hide. That was it. We decided to return home and not go out into the woods again that day. A few days later, we did visit that same location to look for a body or blood, but we found nothing. I will say that this thing was black with a reddish cast. When it went to all fours, its head was visible. It was not a cow. Also, I returned to my home several years later, and being grown and wiser, and maybe more foolish, I visited the woods with my Rottweiler and my .45-70. But I never heard or saw anything of interest. Thanks for your time, Jim. When I was a young boy, I grew up north of Youngstown, Ohio. My hobby and favorite pastime was hunting. I lived in the woods. My parents owned a few acres, and our neighbor to the south had 500 acres of woods, as well as the neighbor to the west, who had 400, and I was allowed to hunt them all. There was an abandoned railroad that went along our property. I was hunting it one day, looking for rabbit. I had been walking about a mile along the old railroad when it began snowing. I didn't mind the snow. It made the landscape look so clean and new. As the snow picked up and my visibility went down, I decided to sit out the storm and return home after it subsided. I went up the hillside of the tracks and made myself a little shelter under some tree branches. The snow stayed intense for a while before it slowed. As it slowed, I noticed someone walking the tracks that I had been walking a short time ago. I knew it must have been my dad looking for me, but looking again, it wasn't my dad. It was a guy in a fur coat. No, it was a monkey. No way I was looking at a man or a monkey that was about 7 feet tall. I saw his face very clearly. It stopped almost directly in front of my little shelter, and I saw it sniffing the air. I knew it smelt me, and my blood was draining. I slowly cocked the hammer of my 12-gauge single shot, and I knew I had one chance to stop it if it headed my way. It sniffed more, then quickly walked away and disappeared into the snowstorm. I waited for what seemed like an hour, but in real life it was a matter of minutes before I exited my shelter and ran home non-stop. The encounters that I have lived through are real, and people tell me that they go their entire life and never see a Bigfoot, but I have had 3 encounters. I can only say that where I grew up, many people have seen things. This was my last story, and again, it is true. I lived it. Thank you, Jim. All right, well, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Matt, for giving us a little guest star cameo appearance tonight. I hope that you've all enjoyed these encounters tonight, and I hope that you'll take a little time to hop on over to Matt's page and give him a listen. And if you like what you hear, you'll hit that like and subscribe button. He's just starting out, but I think there's a lot of potential for that channel. Now, I'll be back again tomorrow with some reports from Phil Shaw from West Branch, Michigan, and I'm compiling some more historical news reports. I've heard everyone loud and clear that you really like those. And maybe I can get another marathon together. But both of those will probably be this weekend. And speaking of encounters, historical or otherwise, if you've been sassed by a Squatch, or if you've been given a royal escort out of the woods by an unhappy king of the forest himself, for heaven's sakes, don't keep it to yourself. Put it down in an email. Send it off to my email, which is right there on the screen, contact@buckeyebigfoot.com. Then I'll narrate it and I'll put it in a video and I'll come here and I can share it with everyone. All right, everyone. In the meantime, until we meet up again, always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening, everyone.